Hey everyone, and welcome back to Ontario Cryptids. I hope you all are doing well. I've been running around and doing some Christmas cleaning and finishing up on the Christmas decorations. I will upload my Christmas tree to the Communities tab in YouTube either today or tomorrow. Now, all I have to do is finish my Christmas shopping. Let me ask, who is done their Christmas shopping? Please leave a comment in the chat. Okay, today we have 3 encounter stories to share with you all. We will be heading to Texas, South Dakota, and Vermont. If you have an encounter story that you would like to share, then please forward your stories to OntarioCryptids@gmail.com. I would be honored to share your story with like-minded people. Now sit back and relax as we begin with today's encounters. The first encounter takes place sometime after November 25th, so that would have been after Thanksgiving of 1976. We're going to Parker County, Texas. This would take place outside of Weatherford City. At the time, Mr. J owned the property. The location was at the end of the street across a cattle guard. And there was a creek bottom and woods and very secluded back then. I have seen a big dark something twice. I grew up in the east side of Weatherford, born and raised on Town Creek, which stretched from Sunshine Lake through Weatherford all the way to Annetta South. During the winter, I trapped and hunted fur-bearing animals. One night on a weekend, I was walking the creek hunting coons and came upon a part of the creek where we all swam during the summer and remember a horrid foul odor that would take our breath. I was shining my light in the trees looking for eyes and heard what sounded like someone falling in the water. But by the time we got to where the noise came from, there was nothing. Only thing was the water was disturbed and kind of murky. I was 12 years old at the time and didn't think too much about it at that time. Now I think back to that time and one other incident, and I know what it was. A few days after that incident, the property owner stopped my buddy and I and asked if we had torn up the flood fence that crossed the creek at his property line. We told him that we didn't do any such thing, and that the water was cold and over waist deep at that location. He still blamed us. We told him that the fence was not mangled and torn when we were there. That really made us wonder because whatever that being was, it had come back on that same path and had torn up the fence in just a couple of days. 5 years before, on the same property, my brother and a neighbor boy and I all watched a dark object walk from the creek bottom across an open neck of field, step over a 5-strand barbed wire fence, walk over railroad tracks, and disappear on the other side of the railroad tracks. We were several hundred yards from it, and I remember all 3 of us shooting BB guns at it. I do remember that it did not even turn to look at us. We got home, told my parents, and got in trouble. They said we were shooting at a hobo. That wasn't a hobo, but my dad said that they weren't any monsters in 1972. This next encounter takes place on April 4th of 1986. We are going to be going to Brown County, South Dakota, and the nearest town is Aberdeen. When I was a senior in high school in 1986, I was staying overnight at a friend's who lived about 8 miles north of the town where I lived, Aberdeen. It's very flat in this area, although it does start to get somewhat hilly just to the north of where my friend lived. Very few trees, just miles of open farmland, and very little population. He lived on a stretch of gravel road that extended about 2 miles west of Highway 281, and there are a few other farmhouses along the same road. My friend and I were sitting in the basement talking until it was quite late, about 2 a.m. It was a very nice spring evening, nice enough to keep the basement window open for fresh air. We were both getting pretty tired, and we were trying to talk somewhat quietly so as not to wake the rest of the family upstairs. At some point, we heard some sort of screech or scream, and we both stopped and looked at each other, wondering if we would hear it again. After a few seconds, we heard it again. My friend had lived in the area all his life, and he said that he'd never heard a sound like that before. It sounded like it was coming from 50 to 100 yards away, so we both went to the basement window and looked out. It was very dark in that area, with no streetlights to speak of, but the moon was lighting up the surroundings somewhat. We couldn't see anything, but the sound continued for probably 10 minutes. It was a very strange sound, and I couldn't identify it as anything I had heard before. I asked my friend if it might be a fox or possibly a deer in pain. It sounded almost like it was in distress, but he didn't think it was anything like that. I can't really describe it. I just remember thinking that it was strange that we couldn't pinpoint what it sounded like. What was really strange is that my friend was quite the outdoorsman, and he was very used to the sounds around that area and attuned to the wildlife, but he was completely stumped as to what could be making the sounds. It sounded like whatever this creature was, it was howling or something, but it was definitely not a dog or coyote, since I have heard both, and it was definitely not any kind of farm animal. I had been a Bigfoot buff since I was a little kid, and I tried to tell myself it couldn't be one of those, but the sound continued for a while, and then it stopped. I had a somewhat hard time getting to sleep that night, as the sound was still in my head, but after the initial 10 minutes, we didn't hear it again. If I remember correctly, we made a half-hearted attempt the next day to go see if we could figure out what had made the noises, but we didn't find anything, not that we looked very hard. I kind of forgot about the incident until I read some of the stories on this site, and I thought I might report it. I have no idea what it was, but it's kind of a strange story. Here's the last one for today. This one occurred on August the 6th of 2019, and we're going to be heading to Lemoyne County, Vermont, and the nearest town is Eden. This sighting took place on August the 6th of 2019 at 10:15 a.m. at our Vermont summer cabin. I am 70, retired RN and former private pilot with excellent vision, 2015, so I was not mistaken. It was not a bear. We have had a bear here by the deck, so I know what bears look like standing up to reach the feeder. It was a sunny day. My small Chihuahua mix was out front in her cage. She was barking, so I walked out to the front deck and looked towards a dirt road where she was looking. We sat back approximately 125 feet from the road. I saw a very black humanoid shape walking on 2 legs go past our driveway. It was half bent over, then straightened up. It had long arms swinging. The head was turned away and appeared to have a very short neck and roundish head from that angle. I said to myself, that looks like a chimp. I watched it for approximately 12 seconds until it disappeared behind trees going east on the road. there are spots that I can see through the trees to the neighbor's drive. So I was looking forward to either go up the drive or continued on the road. When it did not, I walked out to the end of the drive, approximately 200 feet, with my air horn. There was something on the road for some distance. Later in the day, I went out to that area with my small dog. She refused to even walk and was trembling. This is the same dog that almost went through a screen door to attack a bear by our feeder a few weeks ago. I noticed an area of bent weeds that would have been where the creature had exited our woods, going into a small ditch, then back up to get onto the road before walking past our drive. On the roadside, in the direction that I saw it going, there were 3 barefoot heel depressions with faint toe marks approximately 12 inches long. The area was dry and fine gravel, so no clear print. The week before, I had heard twigs snapping and weeds moving between my fenced garden. This approximately 40 feet from the front porch where I often sit. The dog barked. The noise stopped, then started again, so I fired off my air horn, which I always have near me after an encounter with a large coy wolf. The cabin sits above 100 foot above the North Branch Lamoille River. There are many snowmobile and ATV trails, plus the long trail is only a 1/5 of a mile away. It was very wooded and remote. A few homes and camps on our road. Okay, so I'm going to talk to the last story first since it's fresh in my mind. I find it funny that she had an ear horn handy at all times, but that would make sense if you get a lot of bears or wolves in the area, or coyotes for that matter, especially when you have a small dog like a Chihuahua, which would be a perfect meal for a bear, coyote, or a fox. The other thing that I noticed too was the area in Vermont. It's very wooded, very different from the other 2 stories, which were basically flat farmlands. The other 2 locations did have patches of forest and rivers running through them, but most of them looked to be shrubs and not so much trees. So there wouldn't be a lot of cover. So a very unusual location to have a Bigfoot or Sasquatch roaming around. Anyways, that's just my take on these 3 stories, all great in their own rights. And I hope you guys enjoyed them. I also just would like to add that I enjoyed reading your comments, especially the fact that you guys are missing my commentary in the beginning. I did add a little bit of commentary this time, but I am going to try and keep it to a minimum and just get to the story and then have my commentary in the end. All right, so we're going to wrap things up here. So if these stories reminded you of an encounter that you may have had and would like to share, then please forward your stories to OntarioCryptids@gmail.com. I would be honored to share your story on this channel. Thank you all for listening until the end. I truly, truly appreciate it. Please hit the like button on your way out and smash the subscribe button if you're new to my channel. I want you all to have a great weekend, and I hope to see you all next week right here on Ontario Cryptids.